Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. If you are feeling miserable about your personal and family finances, well, you're not alone. A top survey of U.S. consumer sentiment just registered some of the worst numbers in the survey's history.
That's a survey that's been going for over 60, 70 years. And right now we're at one of the lowest points through that entire post-war history of the United States. So the bigger headline is we are awfully close to being as miserable American consumers as they've been at any point in recorded American history.
Close to the most miserable in U.S. history. Now, to be clear, the history of the economic survey only goes back as far as World War II. However, consumer spending now accounts for 70% of all U.S. economic activity. And when consumers are feeling depressed or sad or miserable, spending drops and the economy sputters. At the moment, Americans' personal finances are taking a beating and the economy is dragging because of soaring energy and gas prices.
With the economic fallout from the war with Iran, it is spreading as restrictions on oil supply have pushed the average price of a gallon of gas past the $4 mark. That happened overnight.
First time we've seen prices over $4 a gallon on average nationally since August of 2022.
Now at levels not seen since the start of the war in Ukraine 4 years ago.
This is a record-breaking spike in the cost of gas. According to Gas Buddy, the national average is now above $4 a gallon for the first time in more than 3 years, marking the biggest monthly increase on record. Diesel is up $1.70 a gallon. That is also the biggest spike ever in 1 month.
The biggest spikes in 1 month ever.
Again, what's so remarkable about this, though, is the speed by which this happened. The war's been going on for about a month or so, but gas prices during that period of time have risen by over $1 per gallon now. Now, I want to point out that all of this has to do with the Strait of Hormuz. Looking forward, the question about whether or not gas prices will continue to rise from where they've already risen. Well, the question is whether or not more ships are going to be able to travel through the Strait of Hormuz, as you see on that live map.
Donald Trump says the U.S. is making progress towards a deal with Iran, and that if Iran doesn't agree to a deal soon, the U.S. will bomb Iranian infrastructure, including power plants and water treatment facilities. Iran's response? Headline: Iran responds to Trump ultimatum by bombing oil tanker. After Trump wrote on Truth Social, the United States of America is in serious discussions with a new and more reasonable regime, quote, hours later, Iran responded by reportedly striking a fully laden Kuwaiti oil tanker in a port near Dubai. According to Bloomberg, the strike damaged the hull and started a fire. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, Trump tells aides he's willing to end war without reopening Hormuz. Quote, President Trump told aides he's willing to end the U.S. military campaign against Iran, even if the Strait of Hormuz remains largely closed, administration officials said, likely extending Tehran's firm grip on the waterway and leaving a complex operation to reopen it for a later date.
Now that we're hearing that the president says he's willing to end this war even if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, well, for a passageway where 20% of the world's oil goes through, that means prices could remain elevated, if not even go higher from here.
And how much higher, according to oil analysts?
Where we can go, look, physically we've already priced 170. So if this stays, we can easily go there. I've seen 200. We could go to these levels.
$200 for a barrel of oil if Iran is able to continue to control what does and does not go through the Strait of Hormuz. And keep in mind, the price per barrel of oil before the war began was $65. $65 to $170 or $200. At $170 per barrel, gasoline prices would average around $6 a gallon. And even in parts of the United States where gas prices are usually the lowest, costs are already soaring.
Prices jumped 20 cents a gallon here in Houston today. This is a part of the country that usually has cheaper fuel prices, and that increases the cost of delivering food and household items and air travel and the cost of living for everybody.
I mean, most Americans now have seen 2 paychecks impacted by the higher price of fuel. Only now moving forward do those budgets really get realigned.
So personal and family financial budgets are only just beginning to feel the squeeze. Even Trump cheerleading networks like Fox Business News are sounding the alarm, warning that entire sectors of the U.S. economy, including the housing market, are in trouble.
Energy prices are kryptonite for the housing market. And the housing market, the best way to describe the housing market has been a blood-stained hellscape because of what's happening with interest rates. Yes, I'm being a little overly dramatic. But what I would say is if you look at what we were hoping for rates to come down and for mortgages to be affordable.
But mortgages are going back up and now average above 6% as the financial markets reel from the energy shock on the economy. Donald Trump has been trying to find ways to increase global oil supply and bring energy prices back down, but the impact has been negligible and prices keep rising.
You know, the president tried a couple of gimmicks, pulling oil stuff out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, allowing Americans to buy oil from Russia and in fact from Iran. But most of those are just really small, which is much of the world's oil, roughly a fifth of it, is behind the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, and it's really hard to get stuff through. And so you've got less oil for a world that's just as hungry for it. The only way that you can make all of that work is for the oil price to go up to a point where some people will do without.
Some people doing without oil and gas. Relatedly, several companies are now reinstituting work-from-home provisions that were first established during the COVID pandemic. The idea is to save workers money on transportation costs. And speaking of transportation, rising jet fuel prices are causing airline tickets to go up quickly. So travelers are paying more to fly as they wait in longer lines related to the TSA not being funded. In other words, consumers are paying more and have less efficiency in their lives.
What's really going to happen is oil prices go up, the price of jet fuel's going up, and you've got the extra price that you're forcing people to pay. They now have to arrive at the airport 1, 2, 3 hours earlier. All of that makes airfares more expensive, and it's going to lead to less flying. So what you might see is a few less flights being scheduled. That will hit the profitability of the airlines. It could ultimately hit the employment of airlines.
The employment, as in airline worker layoffs, to go along with other layoffs across the United States as the economy slows down. And Americans are already miserable about their finances even before the economic damage from Trump's war in Iran gets worse. The implications of all of this are huge, economically and politically. Voters say the economy is the #1 issue in this year's midterm elections. But even before voters can take out their frustrations on Donald Trump and his Republican Party, mere financial survival is the order of the day. And it's getting more challenging. By the way, some Republicans are talking about invoking the 25th Amendment as Donald Trump's polls and health crash. Trump's walk is slower, his ankles are swelling, the scabby marks in his hand are bigger, requiring more makeup, and the verbal blunders keep getting worse.
The President of the United States, Gavin Newsom, admitted that named the undisputed, when did this come out? We didn't need him before we started Dig We Must. Dig Me Must.
Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. One of the most popular is from Human Herbivore, who wrote, "The fact that anyone thinks Trump is doing a good job is a reason enough to worry about mental health in America." I hear you. I look forward to reading your comments about the misery of U.S. consumers reaching the worst levels in survey history. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.